And today, as you may know, we're talking all about breakfast today. Everything is healthy breakfast. And I got two things to say about breakfast before we get into it. So when you think about breakfast, you want to look at what the first thing about breakfast is. You want to look at balancing your food groups. So I'm going to be asking when I look at, when I look at an idea for breakfast, where's my protein coming from and where's my fiber coming from? And we'll talk a lot more about that once we get into the recipes for today. But it's really about balancing at least 2 or 3 food groups, and again, finding a good source of protein in that breakfast and also finding a good source of fiber. Those 2 things set you up for success for the whole rest of the day. Helps your blood sugar stay more stable. It's good for your long-term health as far as lowering risk of chronic disease and helping you better manage any chronic conditions you may already have. So all of that. And then the second thing I would have to say about breakfast, let me think. That was the first thing. Oh, the second thing is, none of us get enough fruits and vegetables. We can all stand to get more fruits and vegetables into our daily routine, right? Getting vegetables into breakfast is something that typically people find the hardest. They're more likely willing, okay, I'll try to get some more fruits and vegetables in my snacks or my lunch or my dinner. But breakfast is often a tricky one. So part of our mission here today was to show you what are some ways you could actually go about adding some vegetables to breakfast. Some of you may be used to doing that at breakfast, some of you may not. So you'll check it out in the recipes that we've got here today. So we can get into it. I don't think I said my name yet. My name is Laura Silver. I am a dietitian with Sodexo here at University Hospitals. And when I'm not here doing classes, you'll find me across the street at the Rainbow Center for Women and Children. And then I'm also at the Otis Moss Junior Health Center as well. And I'll have our chefs introduce themselves and we'll get into it.
Thanks, Laura. I'm Anthony Verona. I'm the Culinary Director for University Hospital Health System with Sodexo. And over here we have Tracy Mearty, who's the Retail Executive Chef down at the main campus, the Cleveland Medical Center right down the street. So thanks, Tracy, for helping out today. We've been here since about 1:30, just doing some prep work for you guys. So first of all, I just want to start off with some safety topic, right? Anytime we start a little discussion, we want to talk about some safety things. And today, if you notice on your table, we have raw eggs, okay? So we always want to make sure that when we're handling raw eggs, I already cracked those today, but if you were going to crack them yourselves, you always want to wash your hands every time you deal with a raw poultry product, okay? So safety is a very important thing because we don't want to get anybody sick. No one's saying that the eggs are bad, but you never know. There is salmonella out there. So everything else is pretty much, flour, oats, not really a health risk. So before you guys touch anything over there, we're not going to do it right now, but we are going to wash our hands because we are going to be dealing with something that's going to go in our mouth. So even though it's going to be cooked, we want to wash our hands and be safe. So ready to go, Laura?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit today about what we're going to be doing. So I made the bread. We're going to talk a little bit about that a little bit more, and Tracy made the frittata. Okay. So let's talk real quick about the frittata, but then you guys are going to do a hands-on, and we'll get a little bit more in depth. But I just wanted, the frittata is basically an egg dish that's baked. Usually has some sort of vegetables in it. Again, we're going to talk more about that. Let's talk more specifically about the
muffins.
The muffins, yes,
muffins.
the zucchini oat bran muffins. Sounds kind of healthy, doesn't it? It is, but it tastes really good. I was very happily surprised. So
we made sure to test them before class just to make sure that they were tasty.
Yeah, we definitely tested them. So today we're going to talk about how do we bake what we call a quick bread, okay? And we're going to get a little bit more in depth with that, but I just wanted to go over real quick. So what are you guys going to learn today? Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about terms in a little bit, but a quick bread preparation, that's one thing you're going to learn today. You're going to learn about when your quick bread is done, right? A lot of people have issues with taking it out and it's not done. So we're going to do the skewer, the pick method, but we also have a temperature gauge. So either way works, but both are kind of fail-safe. We're going to talk about different leavening agents. So what's a leavening agent? That's what makes it rise. Okay, so we're going to talk about what we're using today, and then we can also talk about a little bit other types of leavening agents for other items. The wet-dry method. Okay, we're going to talk about the wet ingredients and the dry ingredients and mixing them all together. Proper mixing, not over mixing, right? It's real important. Again, we're going to talk about the wheat flour that we're using. As I'm mixing this, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what can happen if you over mix a quick bread or a muffin, okay? Pan preparation is very important. Again, I'm going to show you how to prepare this pan. So when you're done with it, you just pull it like this and they fall right out. Who's had the time where you didn't prepare the pan well, you do it like this and you're like, and then they pull out in pieces. Nobody wants that, right? So that's important. And then we're going to talk a little bit about egg cookery, safety, how to properly cook an egg, temperature of what the eggs should be when they're done, okay? And then afterwards, so it's going to take about 45 minutes, and then afterwards we're going to have some questions, and then in the middle of the session we're going to do a hands-on, and you actually are going to make the quick bread, okay?
Does everyone have a copy of the recipes in front of them? Would anyone like one? And I'm sorry, we didn't introduce, we have a volunteer, John, here today. Thank you so much for being here, John. Yeah, if anyone wants a recipe, feel free to wave your hand and John can bring one over to you. Great.
So let's talk about real quick, like I said before, a quick bread. What's a quick bread? What's the difference between a quick bread, and these are all terms I didn't make up, right? These are professional terms. The difference between a quick bread and a regular bread, okay? A quick bread is usually wet and dry ingredients, and it's leavened. Leavening means what's going to give it its rise. Quick breads are usually leavened with baking soda or baking powder, but a typical bread that you'd buy in the supermarket, like a loaf of bread, is raised with yeast. Everybody knows what yeast is? So it's a living organism that you add a little bit of warm water to, and have you ever made bread? Anybody ever made bread? Right? And it puffs up. That smell kind of smells like beer. So that's a quick bread. We're going to learn about the muffin method. So the muffin method is just like you were making a muffin, and it's the easiest thing in the world. It's a wet ingredient and it's a dry ingredient, and you mix the two together, and that's pretty much it. And you can see in front of you, I already measured out all the ingredients. We're going to talk about mise en place. So what's mise en place? You can see it. It's all in front of you. So in French, mise en place means everything in its place, and every place has its thing. Okay? Imagine being a baker, right? And you're baking. And your mixer is all the way over across the kitchen, and your oven's over in the corner. That doesn't make sense, right? So when they build bakeries, they make sure the mixer is near the oven, and the oven's near the mixer, and all the equipment is somewhat in proximity to each other. It just makes your life a lot easier. Same principle with this. I measured everything out, right? I know a lot of people will take a bowl, and they'll just measure everything into a bowl. And is that wrong? No, that's not wrong. But I prefer to measure everything out all at once, like I do here when I bake. That way everything's measured and we're all good to go, because, I don't know, you measure, you don't measure enough, you measure a little too much. To me, and hopefully you'll take this suggestion, is you measure it all out in different containers, and then when you're ready to mix it together, you mix it together, okay? We're going to talk about cross-contamination, right? If you can notice, I brought up safety a lot of times because we don't want to get people sick. You know, we're in the professional food service business, so we got to make sure we keep people safe because we're feeding a lot of people, right? So we're going to talk about cross-contamination. So what is cross-contamination? Okay, you are using the eggs, for example, and a little bit spills on the counter, right? And then the muffin comes out of the muffins come out. Now we got raw egg on the counter. The muffins come out. You let them cool. Everything's great. Say you had a cutting board down there and it seeped underneath the cutting board. Then you flip the cutting board over, and now you cut your muffin or whatever on your cutting board. Now it has the raw egg on there. That's cross-contamination. This is raw. Now somehow you're going to ingest a raw egg. Now I know Rocky did it, right? and it might not hurt you, but it may. So you want to try to avoid that, right? So we want to make sure that, if we are using raw products, that we clean up afterwards and clean up properly. I'm not going to go all into how we clean up properly, but you want to make sure you disinfect it and sanitize it and clean it and all that, okay? Everybody's got that spray at home. We talked a little bit about leavening in front of you. We do have some leavening. This is baking powder, all right? So baking powder reacts with different acids in the food and gives it a puff when it hits the heat, right? sodium bicarbonate, and it puffs up and it gives it a little lighter texture. Now we are using whole wheat flour. Let's talk about the ingredients a little bit. So in front of you, we all right on time? Okay, good. So in front of you, let's go over the ingredients for the oat bran muffin. This is whole wheat pastry flour. Okay, anybody know what pastry flour is? So pastry flour, AP flour, which is all-purpose flour, has a lot higher protein content than cake flour or pastry flour. So what pastry flour is going to do, and think about a chicken breast. When you cook a chicken breast is all protein. Well, not all, but a lot of it. It's real floppy, but when it cooks, it gets firm, right? Well, that's what happens when you have a flour that has a lot of protein in it. When it cooks, it tightens up. So you want a flour with a little bit less protein in it to give you a lighter textured final product. So you can use all-purpose flour, but you're going to have a little denser product. So it's best if you get pastry flour, and they do have pastry flour here.
Yeah, you'll usually see whole wheat flour or whole wheat pastry flour. And you're used to a lot of you might be used to I know I grew up baking with all-purpose flour, and that was it. And the difference between all-purpose flour and something like whole wheat flour or whole wheat pastry flour, any of those whole grain flours, it's going to be the whole grain. So it's got a lot more nutrition and a lot more fiber per bite, and it's typically better for people's blood sugar levels and other things, and your long-term heart health and all kinds of things. So that's why we like to feature a recipe that's using a whole grain flour, so that you can get a sense of what it tastes like, how to work with it, what are some good recipes that you can use for it.
And there's a lot of reasons why people don't use whole grains, because they can be a little denser, but they are healthier for you, and we're going to teach you how to give it a lighter texture than using just straight up wheat flour, regular white flour. All right, we're going to use rolled oats, so oatmeal, right? And basically what they do is they parboil them, and they call them rolled oats because if you look at them they actually roll them to get them really, really thin, and it increases the cooking time, right? So they're gonna cook quicker. All right, a little bit of sugar. So this recipe right here yields 12 muffins. So we have a 1/4 cup of sugar, I think, in there. So very small amount, okay?
You look at the average muffin that you're going to get at any coffee shop or any other place. It's going to have way more sugar per muffin than this. This is a really low sugar recipe.
Yeah, they might as well just call it cake. Okay. Right. So then we have our baking powder, which we talked about. Some warm spices, so some cinnamon and some nutmeg. A little bit of salt. You got to have salt in baking, all right, because it brings out the flavor. I'm going to save the dates for the last. Some crushed almonds, walnuts. Some grated zucchini that we grated and we put in a colander to let the juices run out. You can do that. You can also squeeze it in your hands to squeeze out the moisture. We didn't do that here. We just found that it was dry enough just by grating it. So you can see there's no moisture in the bottom, nice and dry. A little bit of neutral oil. I like peanut oil. Right? Is that all right? Peanut oil is all right?
Sure.
Yep. Couple eggs. Now this is the interesting thing. These are dates. Anybody know what dates are? What's something like a date? I don't know, the closest thing I can think of is like a raisin, I guess, but it's not really a raisin. So what we did with the dates is we soaked them in hot water. We boiled some water, we covered the dates in hot water and let them sit for about an hour. They got nice and plump and soft. And then I ran them through a blender and got them nice and pureed. And what's that gonna do for your muffin is just gonna give it a, did you try the muffin? Did you like it? Yes. So it's not like I don't know, what's a blueberry cinnamon streusel muffin that you're gonna get at the bakery, right? A little different, but it's healthier, right? But it's good. So the dates is a little different, okay? But they do sell dates here. So I always like to throw a little spin in our recipes, and I think this is a real different spin. So dates are really great, and they're going to add a lot of depth and reduce the amount of refined sugar and some more natural sugars.
And what's nice about using fruit like dates or raisins or fresh fruit to sweeten recipes like this, you're getting the fiber that's naturally in those fruits in that recipe. So you're actually adding fiber into that recipe, and desserts typically are not going to have much fiber. So the more fiber something has, the more the slower it is to hit your blood sugar when you're digesting it. So fiber is your friend when you're thinking about dessert. So this is a really easy way, and a lot of people will prep, a larger amount of date paste, and then you can keep that around and use that to sweeten a variety of things instead of sugar, or to be able to cut back on sugar and have some sugar and some of the date paste. It's a nice way to sweeten things sometimes.
And typically with recipes, I always, for people that have been in my classes before, I really emphasize about a recipe as kind of a guide. Right? This isn't a chili though, right? Chili, you can use turkey, you could use lamb, you could use beef, you could go vegetarian. This is a baking recipe. A lot of times we like to call them formulas, not recipes, because, if I said, oh, don't put baking powder in it, you would not like it, right? It'd be dense and nasty. But there are a few things, you could replace this with carrots, and I don't think that would change your recipe a lot. What other vegetable could we put in there? Let's stick with carrots.
What about a squash?
I think carrots would be okay with that. Of course, your flours could change a little bit. You could use regular flour, but there's really not a lot you're going to change with this. So when you follow a baking formula, try to stick to the recipe pretty much to the T, okay? And that's one reason why I really portion these out in these little cups, or whatever you have at home, because it really, when it says 2 tablespoons or 2 teaspoons of baking powder, you really need to put 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Not a heaping teaspoon, a level teaspoon, okay? Let's get started. Whoops. All right, so I have this all in order here, and this is the order you should do it in. So I have 2 bowls, and this is the muffin method. Very simple. Dry ingredients. We're gonna add our wheat flour, our oats, our sugar, baking powder, our spices of cinnamon, nutmeg, and our salt. So everything's dry in here. We want to mix this together, because there is that baking powder in there, and if we just dump the dry in there, it might hit the baking powder and clump up. So you kind of want to just mix it thoroughly. So now you're evenly distributing your baking powder and all the other ingredients. So as it comes, and I can see the color changing a little bit, and it looks nicely mixed. There's our dry. Simple, right? Next, we're going to add our eggs, our paste of date. I like to use a rubber spatula here to our oil. Then we want to just lightly break up the eggs and mix this together.
Now, are there any oils that you would not want to use for a recipe like this that's going into the oven?
How about motor oil?
Good
no
point.
Motor oil.
Okay. Any other kind of oils that we would want to avoid, either for flavor reasons or for smoke point, like heat reasons?
Oh, you're asking me?
Right?
Yeah, I wouldn't use extra virgin olive oil in this. No, it's going to add a lot of flavor, but not a good flavor. But any neutral oil, you could use canola, you could use corn, you could use peanut, safflower. Those kind of, when you taste those oils, you really don't taste anything.
Do a lot of people cook with peanut oil? Do a lot of you have peanut oil at home? Okay, so just giving you some options.
Yeah.
But try peanut oil too, Is what you said? Is grapeseed oil okay? Yeah, I would say so, right? Yeah, that's a good high heat oil, yeah.
So you can see I incorporated, there was a little clumpy on the dates, but if you can see in there, it's pretty well. Now I'm going to add my zucchini. We're going to add those at the end, the walnuts. So at this point, I'm just going to put a glove on because I'm going to use this to... We talked about pan preparation, right? It's key. Now this is a good pan. If you had an older pan at home that was either non-stick because it was used so much, then that's great. This is kind of has a little coating on it, so it's non-stick. I just want to do it, and I don't want to overdo it. But what I was going to say is that if you had a pan that you notice sticks a lot and oil's not just going to do it, you can oil this and then hit it with just a little bit of flour, right? And kind of swish it around and then knock it out. That'll help as well. So that's really all for this pan that we need. All right, now this is the most important part of making a quick bread. So you have your wet ingredients here and your dry ingredients here. So the muffin method, it takes 3 stages. I look at this and I say, how much can I get? A third, and a third. So I take a third of it, I mix it in till I don't see any more streaks of flour, just till I don't see any. That's it. I add another third of the ingredients of the dry. I mix it in till I don't see any streaks of flour. You see, there's gluten in flour. Can you explain gluten?
Sure. So gluten is a protein that's found in wheat and some other grains as well. But what Chef Tony is talking about is how, is there such a thing as over mixing with a muffin batter? And yes, there is. So this technique is really to help, get the, the highest number of strokes and mixing that you need to do the recipe well, but not too much that it over mixes. So when the protein in wheat called gluten makes contact with water and gets moisture into it, then it starts to develop, and then there's a sweet spot, and then after that sweet spot it can tighten up and then become too dense and chewy and tough, and that can happen with breads. And we were talking about whole wheat flour. With the protein content that's in it, the whole grain flours can be a little more dense and have a little more protein like that. So there's a little more of a risk of over mixing when you're using a whole grain flour. So that's why we're really emphasizing it here. And
when you're making a yeast leaven bread, you want to develop that gluten. So you really work it hard, and that's why sometimes you use a mixer. But with this, you don't want to. So I'm going to add my third stage. And again, I'm just folding this in very gently, just until it's mixed. Obviously, you want to mix it. You don't want to have any pockets of flour, but you can see I'm scraping the sides. And as soon as I see that's it. I'm going to add my walnuts. I'm going to do another turn or two, just till everything's incorporated. Now, if I sat here and beat the heck out of it, you're going to get a tougher dough.
I like to bake a lot, and I remember reading this technique in recipes and not quite fully understanding or appreciating why does it matter, why is it so important. And then when I went back to school to study nutrition, we actually did tests where you did a muffin batter where you mixed it, 20 strokes and then another 50 and then another 150. So you could actually compare what the muffins look like when they're over mixed. And there's such a huge difference, They're so much more tender and light and fluffy. So I encourage you to try, even if this is something that in case it feels like, that's a little too much fussing over the recipe, I encourage you to try it once and see if you notice a difference in your homemade muffins doing it this way, really.
So you can see what I'm doing. I'm just evenly distributing these between 12 muffin tins. 12 muffin. And the recipe said it got 12, right? I think we did good. I'm going to look a little bit short somewhere. There we go. That's it. And I don't like any on my edges because it burns. Okay? Now one thing I do is I just even it out just a little. And then it goes in a 350 degree oven. Now, quick breads will cook in the center at about 195 to 206 degrees. So if you happen to have one of these, it's really nice. And they sell them here, instant read thermometers. You just put it in there, and once it hits 195, it's done. There is no, but you can always do the poke test, and we're going to show you here in a little bit where you poke it and it comes out clean and it's done. Okay? So I think what we need to do now, Laura, we got it good on time?
Yeah.
What we need to do now is we're gonna start making our muffins. So just like I showed you, right? Hold up, don't do anything yet because I want everybody to wash their hands. Come on up. I got 2 hand sinks, so you can form 2 lines. Wash your hands and then we'll get to making some muffins. So what we made today was some healthy breakfast items. And right here we have a zucchini oat bran muffin. In the zucchini oat bran muffin is obviously oats, zucchini, there's some whole wheat pastry flour, as well as some pureed dates, which really give it a lot of richness and a lot of depth. So when you eat it, you're gonna really notice a real different than a normal muffin. We lightened it up with a little bit of eggs. And then baked it off in a muffin tin. So right there you can see the whole muffin, and then we cut it up for everybody to enjoy.